Hi there. Welcome to our Hot Topics broadcast today. I'm Kate Hooley. I'm the director of the MFA program in Creative Nonfiction at Bay Path University. And I'm here today with Heidi Parton, senior editor of Multiplicity and a faculty member within our MFA, and Robin Weaver, who is an MFA candidate and also a student editor for Multiplicity. Multiplicity is our online literary magazine. We started it in 2020, and in fact, our first issue was scheduled for March 9th of 2020, right as lockdown began. We had a big sort of head-scratching moment then, and all kind of conferred and thought, well, maybe we don't launch right this minute. And then we thought, well, maybe we do. And so we took a few weeks, and one thing you'll notice if you go back and look in our archive to that very first issue is, first of all, it was all MFA faculty. That was at the request of our university. So the issue is all built from essays that were contributed and poetry contributed from our MFA faculty. But the other thing you'll notice is there are these weird little blurbs at the beginning of each piece. And that's because what we did is we kind of went around and asked everybody to say something that placed their piece in relation to the pandemic and the lockdown. And it's kind of strange to look at that now. And we've thought about, many times we've thought, oh, maybe we should take those out. But I feel like it's an archive and it's a moment. And it does speak to the idea that we were determined, sort of bound and determined, to put this literary magazine out there and started in the world, even at a time when much of the world was in a closed down space. So here we are in 2024. Several issues later, and I thought we'd start by talking about our most recent issue. Kim, if you could switch the slides up for me to the next slide. Our last and most recent issue was themed Out of Control. We theme all of our issues, and this one was an interesting theme. We joked a lot during it. I know Heidi and I said, how about our next theme is go on vacation, you know? It felt like out of control was prevalent. We were wrangling and trying to get control. What we were looking for in this issue was to talk about the idea of being in control and the idea of being out of control. And I'll read our little editorial note that was at the start of this issue. In this issue, we explore control, how badly we want it, what we'll do to get it, and how often we find ourselves in situations where we have very little of it. From lives in progress, we experience moments when attempts at control fail miserably, moments when we are forced to tighten or lighten our grip, moments when we find comfort in the chaos or transformation in the unexpected. 11 essayists, 4 poets, and 2 photographers traverse the jagged, asymmetrical, occasionally hilarious line between in and out of control. So I thought we could start today by talking a little bit about the process that we go through behind the scenes to get to this final issue with its little note up front. By the way, the swishy artwork at the top is from one of our photographers in the issue. Really interesting work. So I encourage you to slip over to multiplicity.com and check that out. But Robin, I wanted you to talk a little bit about working in the class and the process that we went through there to start to curate the issue.
So working in the class was really eye-opening for me because I've submitted to literary magazines before, been accepted, I've been declined, and I never really knew what went on behind the scenes to lead them to that acceptance or denial. So it was really interesting, and basically the process for us as students was Kate and Heidi would assign us submissions to read. And so we were reading a lot of submissions, and then we would make notes and submittable. about what we liked or didn't like about those pieces. And we went through that process and we narrowed them down. And then we all talked together to agree on the final 11 essays.
Yeah, and I have to say that I loved our couple of sessions that we had as we got closer to the finals. Heidi, can you talk about those a little?
Yeah, I mean, we had narrowed it down. These were still, our students were reading these blind. These are blind submissions, so they do not know who is submitting these and the background. But we gathered, um, you know, you submittable. The nice thing about submittable is the ratings will stack up, and you can, start to see which, and they rise to the top. Certain ones rise to the top, and those are ones that we wanted to bring into class and discuss as a class. Because people had different views, we allowed people to advocate for their pieces, some of their favorite pieces. There might be but been differing opinions, and we listened to those. And by and large, what was really fascinating to me, and this was the first time we did this as a class, so Multiplicity Studio, it was the first round out, and I didn't know how much, we really did rely on what our students, were coming up with. They really had great comments and views, and really smart, thoughtful process that, really most of the pieces that ended up in this out of control issue really were ones that were highly rated by our students. So
Yeah, I mean, this was the first time, as you mentioned, the course Multiplicity Studio was created just last fall. And it was a goal of mine for many years to somehow find a way to have more student involvement in the literary magazine. When we first started it, we had a lot of involvement as we went along, but we hadn't really had too many students involved. And the idea of creating a course that could be the sort of the laboratory for the magazine and help us with the curation piece of it, and also help students learn more about the larger world of literary magazines, had been kind of kicking around for a while. And happily, sometime last August, I mentioned it to our new dean, and she just loved the idea, and voila, a syllabus was built, a course was approved, and we ran it last spring. But yes, I think that those two meetings, we asked everyone to come up with, I believe it was a top 12 or top 10 of their favorites and come with their lists. And Robin, do you remember anything about your top favorites from that?
Um,
Not putting you on the spot, but I felt like the interesting thing was, to me, everyone came with their favorites to the first meeting. Not everyone had read every submission, so as a result, there was more reading to do before the next meeting, and some folks changed how they rated based on new reading and based on recommendations of their classmates. Do you remember that piece of it, Robin?
I do remember because I believe my top 10 changed a little bit once I had read all of the submissions that were in consideration. Um, I think I stuck by a lot of my first selections, but I I think I may have added two or three that I hadn't read before to my list of favorites.
And as we
Um,
got closer, we were narrowing down those lists too, so that people had to advocate for their top two or three, because in the final analysis, we usually do 12 essays, and we feature 4 poets, and depending on the photography, usually 2 at most photographers. So it is a winnowing process. We had 100 submissions for the issue, which was great. But boy, and this is where we tell everyone who's listening, if you submit to a literary magazine and you get turned away, please know that it probably has very little to do with the quality of your submissions. And you hear this all the time, but I think we can all, I think Robin can maybe speak to this, and Heidi, I'd love you to speak to this. that it is truly, in this case, especially in a themed issue, it's about fit. It's about what will sit side by side in the issue. And Heidi, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we had for this particular issue, we had two submissions that, well, two sets of submissions, they're twins, that were very similar topically. And so even though they were really all four of them fine submissions, we could really only run with one of each from those sort of twin topics, we can call them. And so really, when you submit to a literary magazine, that may happen. Your piece may just be too similar to something else that was submitted, or something that was submitted a year earlier, or 3 years earlier, depending on how, literary journal editors consider the magazine as a whole too. So I would say that's what's and it really, we did have some that spoke to one another really well, and that was considered. And I will say we just had a reading in conjunction with Hatch Library, with 5 or 6 of
Six, yep.
of our the contributors to the Out of Control issue, and that is available online. Maybe we can find a link, but that it can still be watched, the recording. What was really fascinating is that in having these writers there reading their work, how much even in that reading, some of them spoke to one another. And the topic became illuminated for me even further hearing it read out loud, because so many of these, we thought, oh, this is a lot of trauma stuff coming in, but so many of it spoke to the things that happen to our body. And really, when you get down to that came out in our reading, we were discussing it, what really seems out of control is things happen with our body, even aging. One of the pieces was really about aging, and I'm far enough along the road that I'm realizing that one's body really starts to do things that feel out of control, that I can't necessarily control. So I think that's what, when you're submitting to a lit magazine, you just don't know what's going on the backside of things. And I think that's the beauty of having this experience. I mean, not only have I worked in a variety of capacities, volunteer alum editor to now senior editor at Multiplicity, and I was also 1 year not working with it, and I was contributor and have a piece in it. So but working behind the scenes, you really learn more about other people's writing, and you learn a little bit more about the process. And it can start to feel a little bit less scary, I think, to submit, because you realize these are just people behind there, and there's oftentimes really good reasons that have nothing to do with your writing that a piece may get so-called rejected, but we'll just say it just wasn't right.
Absolutely. Robin,
I remember we had some.
Yeah, talk to that.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I remember we had some really, really good pieces that we had to end up rejecting. A couple of them, like Heidi said, because they were just too similar to other ones that were selected. But I know there were a few that we said, we hope this author goes and submits this somewhere else because it's that good.
Yeah, and also when we feel like somebody submitted something really great, but we can't fit it in, we often invite them to, watch for our next call for submission and submit again. I want to take this moment to say, if you do have questions that you'd like to post in the chat, we'll keep our eye over there. Or actually, Kim Adamczyk, who's in the background, who is the Assistant Director of Admissions at BayPath, is helping out on the tech side, and so she'll keep her eye on that too. So feel free, if you have questions, to post them there.
I want to mention our quick work, because
oh yeah, good.
In addition to having the core essays and poems and the photography submitted, in the lead up to it, many times Multiplicity has published quick work, which is short, 100-word. Is that right? Is it 100 words?
100 words or fewer. Yep.
Yeah, pieces. And this because we had a studio class, this time we had our students write these, and we worked with them. So it was an opportunity for our students that were in the class to have a small a work published, which, because it's saying it's small doesn't mean it's easy. Sometimes writing smaller is harder. So we had some really fabulous quick work pieces from this Multiplicity studio last year, including Robin had a piece. So.
Yeah, Robbins, I loved Robbins. And, that was a great thing because initially the idea was to give students a taste of what that writing might be like and to give them an opportunity. And what was so interesting was almost every student, I think every student wrote like 2 or 3 or 4, or one student wrote 5 different quick works, because once they got going on this 100-word, it's a very kind of addictive genre, I guess I would say, of micro flash nonfiction. And so although I didn't necessarily anticipate that the quality would be such that we'd say, okay, we've got our quick work, let's just have our students, let's publish them all. And so we did the editorial process. Robin, do you remember a little bit about that and your quick work experience?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say the quick work was really hard because the 100 words that I ended up submitting came from a much longer essay. And I was like, how do I take this essay and condense it down into 100 words? But I did it. And then I don't remember, I think it was Kate, you gave me some feedback, some suggestions for edits, and I looked at those and I said, yeah, I'm good with those edits. So we made them. And then we had to find some ideas for a photo that would go with our piece.
Yeah.
And that was also really challenging just because of the subject of my piece, but
yeah, and also one of the other things that happened in the class was the search for images for the issue. And so once we had decided these are our final pieces, then we had some looking around to see if folks could suggest images for the issue. And in all cases, there were images suggested by students that did make the issue, and there was a little bit of editorial towards the very end of the class as well. I'd like to go to the slide, Kim, for our next.
Can I just quickly jump in? We do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
And while we're still on this, we have a great question. How many times a year do you take submissions, and is there always a topic given that you want to publish?
Oh my goodness, the perfect question for our segue. So after I answer the question, Kim, if you could put up our call, yeah. So right here is our call for submissions, which we just opened last Tuesday. We gave it Thanksgiving week in case anyone wanted to, go hurry home and write after the family drama that sometimes happens on Thanksgiving. So yes, we always work with a theme. And at this point, the magazine is annual. It comes out in usually right about mid-June, early summer, right before summer. It's still spring, but it feels a little bit more like summer. And our call, as you can see, opened last week, generally opens in November, and it runs into January, and giving people all the holiday inspiration they might need to write. And we do the themes because we like them. From the beginning, we decided we wanted to do themed calls, especially since we didn't imagine getting to a point. This is part of the the Bay Path MFA initiative. A lot of the labor on multiplicity is sort of above and beyond, and so we knew to start we probably would be an annual, and that's also part of why quick work came into play, because quick work allows us to sort of expand our season and potentially expand our submissions into the short work zone. So we've done quick work in advance of every issue, always tied to the same theme of the issue. So this is, I'll let you just, I'm not going to read this one out loud to you, but this is our theme for our next issue. And we did a lot of back and forth before we came here. We actually had 2 other calls written before we landed on this call, which I'm actually really excited about. I think we could get some really interesting work. I hope that we do. So that's, I think that answered that question, Kim. Did I cover what they needed to know?
I believe you did, yes.
All right, excellent. So I think, Kim, since you're there, maybe we'll turn it over to you to just say a little bit about the home of our Multiplicity Magazine and our Bay Path MFA. We are housed at, or I say housed, but we're all operating remotely and all zooming in from different locations today. But the MFA program is, quick overview here. We are an online MFA. And although we say no residency required, I think actually a good way to think about our program is it is a full residence program. It's just that the residence is online. It's a very active program. Yes, and we take new students in September, January, and May. And Kim, can you just run through Bay Path for a second for us?
Sure. A couple of quick things I like to point out from this slide is at Bay Path, we acknowledge and respect that all of our students are either working full-time, working part-time, or have a family life, work-life balance that is going to consume a lot of their time. So for our consideration, full-time status as a student is 2 classes per semester and part-time is 1 class. And I think that's just really important for students to know. We're not expecting you to divide yourself any more than you probably already are on any given day. We're always happy and willing to talk to you about how we've seen students make that balance work in the past. But Bay Path at a glance, who we are. Bay Path was founded in 1897 as a private not-for-profit institution. We have 2 live campuses, Longmeadow and East Longmeadow, and then our huge online platform that we keep running with the majority of our graduate programs, as well as our talk program and some other classes we offer. We're very proud to have a student body of over 3,300 students and have over more than 21,000 alumni worldwide. We think that coming in the next year or so, that number is going to increase even more, which makes us incredibly proud. I think we're looking at 23 right now with that number going up. I'm waiting for those confirmed numbers. And very importantly, we are accredited by the New England Commission of Higher Education. And why did students choose Bay Path? I talked a little bit about that full-time and part-time balance. We provide a flexible and accessible learning environment for our undergraduate and graduate students. We understand you're busy. We understand, this is something on top of numerous things on your plate, and we want to make that work for you. We want to help you achieve your academic and career goals. In doing so, we have fostered an incredibly supportive faculty and staff behind you 100% through the whole journey. We do have an incredibly engaging and diverse community that takes an innovative approach to learning, and in turn gives you immediate and applicable knowledge in the field for what you're looking to be in. The snapshot on the right shows you a little aerial view of our Longmeadow campus. I say small snapshot, but our campus isn't much bigger than that. One of the things I love about our campus, if you ever do make it to our Longmeadow campus, you can walk to any building. I would say, Kate, I don't know if you agree or anybody else on here, it's about a 5-minute walk to any building within our campus so that you can easily get from location to location and visit the whole campus. If you're ever here and want to check out the campus, my information is on the next slide. I'd love to give you a tour. A lot of our students, if they step on campus at all from the online platform, do so around graduation time. So I love giving tours and meeting people at that time.
That's great. Yep, here's some quick contact info. Just turning back to Multiplicity for a second, if we could bring the refuge slide up again. I just want to encourage anyone who's on this webinar or who listens to it later from the recording to consider submitting. You've learned a little bit about our blind submission process. So what happens is it stays blind. We don't know, students reading don't know who they're reading. And that keeps it pretty, pretty fair, and doesn't necessarily give advantage to someone who might have a long literary history or resume, impressive resume. It's all based in the writing. And we always hope when we submit anything, whether it's a manuscript to a publisher or an essay to a literary magazine, or a piece to a commercial magazine, we hope that the quality of the writing is what will be evaluated, and what will be felt. That we read a compelling story and we want to publish it. That's what we look for. When it gets to the final round, then names are revealed, and so it's often a surprise for the students to learn, some of the folks, both, someone who it might be their first time submitting and we've just been blown away, and someone who we're blown away by someone else because we can't believe they submitted to our little literary magazine with their credentials. So again, I just invite you to consider submitting your work. It's always, for a writer, submitting is hard. And sometimes it can feel like a slog. But ultimately, it can be really rewarding, because when you do find that right match between you, your work, and in this case, a literary magazine who really values your work, I think one thing we're really proud of at Multiplicity is we take care with our writers. And, we try to, Heidi's nodding, senior editor Heidi's nodding, that we also sometimes will take a submission that isn't really all the way there yet. But partly because we are part of an MFA program, we're open to the idea that we might work a little harder with the writer because we see this glimmering potential in that piece. And I can think of a couple of pieces in this last issue that followed that trajectory. And I think then everyone learns, because that's also part of what we want to have happen with Multiplicity. That's why we have the class. That's why our alums are involved. And we always want to keep learning. I think that would be an important motto to close with. So if there are any other questions, we're glad to take them now. Oh, I think Heidi wants to say something.
I just want to add, because I don't see it on this slide, just if you might hear us talking about submittable and not know about submittable, that's okay. Just go to multiplicitymagazine.com, and there will be up in the upper right hand corner, you'll see submissions, and if you just click on that, you'll see this call, and that call will take you right to the place in submittable that you need to be. You would need to sign up on submittable, but that's okay, it's free to sign up on submittable. And you see other calls there for other literary magazines as well. But I just wanted to say that's one easy way to get to the calls, to go to multiplicitymagazine.com and then look up in the upper right hand corner for submissions, or up top for submissions.
Yeah, submit your work. And thank you, Heidi. Good catch on that. We're saying submit, but not telling you where to. We should just say a little bit about Submittable. It is an online platform that's used by a lot of literary magazines, including Multiplicity. And so if you're a writer even thinking about submitting, sign yourself up for Submittable. And as Heidi said, there's no charge to sign up for Submittable, and it gives you access to all sorts of calls for all kinds of different work. And we do charge a $3 submission charge to offset some of the costs, but we also have a policy of waiving that without question for anyone who asks us to do so. Believe it or not, you can actually get spammed as a literary magazine, and that little $3 tip jar there helps us both pay our writers and also saves us from reading work that has nothing to do with our theme or is not even work. So that's the logic behind that. But again, I want to emphasize that although we do have that nominal charge, we do waive it as needed.
Kate, can you just answer for us, how long does it take after the submission to get a reply on if your piece has been accepted?
Good question. You can submit at any time up until the point that submissions close, which this time is January 20th. We are reading in January, February, and March, and we tend to notify our writers in late March or April. We don't notify until we've read all the submissions. So it's a process of usually 100 or so admissions, maybe more this time. We've had more each time we have an issue. And so it's the process of working through, giving, great care to all the pieces before we make a determination. And so determinations and notes tend to go out in April.
Wonderful, thank you so much. If we could just give another minute for questions, that would be fabulous. I've put it back on our contact page. If you have general program related questions through the guidance of Kate and the MFA team, I do have some information that I am able to share. If I'm not able to answer a question for you, I would send it over to Kate and introduce the two of you so that that question could be answered for you. But if we haven't spoken and you have interest in the MFA program as a whole or our certificate in narrative medicine, you can use either the email address there, k.adamczyk@baypath.edu, or you can call or text me at 413-384-5278. I can connect you with Kate or different members of the team as needed from there. If you would like the link to our free online application for the program and what materials are needed for your application, just let me know. I'm happy to get that over to you. It doesn't appear that any more questions have come in. So Kate, I'm going to hand it back to you and let you close. But before I do, I just want to say on behalf of the Graduate Admissions Office, thank you to all who attended today, and a special thanks to Kate and her team and the representation of a fantastic student within the program for sharing this information with us today.
I have to say, Robin is one of our favorite students. Well, thank you so much, Kim. Thanks for hosting this. And thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Robin. I really appreciate your taking some time today. It was fun to talk a little bit about multiplicity and remember our process. And, we're looking forward to going through that process again with the class and with everyone on the team. So thanks for coming, everyone who was able to attend, and thanks for listening if you're listening after the fact. Over and out for now.